So today there are two topics that I wanted to talk about, and I think I found a way to weave them together because I wanted to get back to talking about the seven limb prayer, and we were talking about rejoicing. We're on the one about the fourth limb of rejoicing, and I also wanted to talk about this being the what is it 40 50, I think it's 55th or maybe 65th anniversary, no, 55 uh, anniversary yesterday of Bloody Sunday when they marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. And so this was a major civil rights event. It began with a few days earlier when one man, his name was Jimmy Lee Jackson, tried to protect his mother at a voting rights demonstration, and the troopers fatally beat him. And so after that, they decided to have this march for voting rights and for racial equality. And John Lewis, one of our congressmen today, esteemed congressman, was a participant in this 55 years ago when he was a young man. And the African American community was one side of the bridge. They started to walk over the bridge because they were going to march to Montgomery, the state capital. And the troopers and police stood on the other side of the bridge and told them, "Don't come." But it's a free world. You can walk across a bridge if you want to. And they all walked, and the police and the troopers turned dogs on them, the water hoses, they beat them with clubs. It was a horrendous bloodbath. That's why it's called Bloody Sunday. And this was filmed and shown across the country in the evening news. And people were outraged when they saw that. And that really led it. A lot was going on already, but that really pushed through a lot of the civil rights legislation and the Voting Rights Act. But, yeah, a few years ago, not so many years ago, it was in 2013 when the Supreme Court ruled in a case called Shelby County versus Holder about voting rights, and the Supreme Court basically, what do you call it? What they cut out the most important, eviscerated the Voting Rights Act, which had protected the voting rights of many people across the country by making the states that were known for creating problems for those who wanted to vote, having to check with the federal government before they enacted any new voter registration and so on laws. And the Supreme Court eviscerated that. And so impeding people from voting is alive and well in the country, especially in the South. And so some of it has to do with saying that people need voter IDs, which is very hard for people who are impoverished to get because they have to travel a far way to get to the DMV to get their voter ID. They stopped same-day registration, voter registration. They closed many voting places in the Black community, so making it harder for people to vote. stopped early voting, which means people have to take time off of work, which if you are living on an hourly wage, it's very difficult to take time off of work to vote, especially if you have to wait 4 hours in line just to vote. There was things to, so that people who had felony convictions but had been imprisoned paid off their debt to society. They were still denied voting rights. Even in Florida, when they had a voting it on the ballot, so it wasn't just the legislature. The Florida public, voted that the felons could vote again. But then the Florida legislation started creating more blocks, saying that those people had to pay off all their fees and not be in debt before they could vote. And so that made it very difficult for many people to vote. So, there's still all of this, despite all this talk of living in the land of freedom and liberty, So we have a lot of work to do. But how I wanted to link this to rejoicing is to think of the work that the people in the past and present and will do in the future, the work to create more equality in the society, not only equality in voting rights, but I think to do something about the income inequality that we have in this country, which is only getting worse and worse, and will eventually create a lot of social unrest. If you study history, that's the prime thing that creates protests and social unrest, is when the rich get poorer and the poor get poorer. And that's, yes, thank you. The rich want to get richer. They don't, yeah. But when the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and, people want to do it the exact opposite way, then that just creates, if you look, the whole French Revolution was about this. Okay, and that started, this whole wave in Europe of the public standing up for their rights against, the monarchical government. So I really admire all those people in our country and in other countries who work hard to overcome these things. And especially in the civil rights era, I was just a tween and then a teen during that era. So I understood a little bit of what was going on, but not like I understand now. And so while then I really respected those people, now I respect them even more. And especially the people who went around the South, blacks and whites, trying to register people to vote, and who were brutally murdered by the KKK. And people who set bombs in churches and so on. So to really rejoice in their good hearts and their wish to create a better world, to really rejoice at all the people who are working for that right now and all the people who will work for it. And to, we may be here doing our meditation practice in our retreat, but we can certainly send our love and compassion to all the people who are working for civil rights, all the people who deserve better, who have civil rights but are not able to experience them. Yeah, and to have a determination to do whatever we can in our own lives to create a more equitable society. Yeah, so that's just part of rejoicing, but I wanted to get some of the fourth of the seven limbs in today, and we'll continue on that later.